Hi, I'm James Robinson, and this is a Robinson Stocks stock pick. This is my second video on the 5-part series on the company Maine Foods. Today we're going to talk about the company's operations, which is a deep dive into how efficiently this company delivers goods to their customers. The first place that I always look when I'm considering investing in a company is I look at the gross margins. Believe it or not, I look at gross margins before I look at stock price. I look at gross margins before I look at earnings. Gross margins tell me an awful lot about what's happening with the company. They tell me the company's pricing power. They tell me the company's how cyclical the company's profits might be. Generally speaking, I'm not looking for cyclical profits, and generally speaking, I'm looking for high gross margins. With the case of Maine, it has neither of those things. The income and the gross margins are pretty cyclical, and they're relatively low. The reason that I'm willing to accept that from Maine is, first of all, the company has no debt, which means it's going to be able to withstand the bad times better than their competitors. Number two, they're the largest provider in their marketplace. Their marketplace is to produce eggs, and they're the largest egg producer in America. And generally speaking, the largest producer will have economies of scale their competitors can't compete with. And third of all, Maine has been a company which has bought their competitors over time. They bought 25 of their competitors. And so the way I look at this business is it's a solid business. It's got no debt. It's very well run. The management does a good job. I think it's likely to benefit more from a downturn than their competitors. I think it's likely to get more competitive at a downturn. And so when you add all that stuff up, you can start to ignore gross margins. And that's sort of the way it is with everything. When you look at a company and you're analyzing it, you've got to look at the big picture, and you've got to look at how the pieces fit together. And when you've looked at a couple thousand companies, you do start to get a sense for these things that I think maybe you don't have if you haven't spent as much time looking at companies that I have. So that's sort of the gross margin for this company. They're relatively low. They're relatively cyclical. This is a company that's extremely complex to run. When you think about it, they have 50,000 chickens. They have dozens of facilities. They've got 11 million chickens that are in the pullet stage, which is where they're growing to the point where they're being breeding, and where there are a number of breeding farms. They've also got multiple different kinds of chickens, multiple different kinds of eggs being produced. For example, McDonald's will only buy eggs from cage-free chickens, and so Maine has had to produce a significant number of chickens of that type to meet the requirements. And so all that adds up to lower gross margins you might normally see. But one of the flip sides of that is we're all eating eggs every day, and we're all going to keep eating eggs every day. So this is a market that's not going to change, in my opinion. It's going to go on for a long period of time. There'll be ups and there'll be downs. But in the long run, this company will pay a good dividend. They'll buy back some stock. They'll buy their competitors at decent prices, and they'll grow their market share. So in looking at these two slides, you can see these slides show the earnings and the earnings per share for our company. And when you're looking at these two slides, you're going to notice the obvious, which is these are very cyclical. This is a cyclical company. It goes up and it goes down, and it goes back up and it goes back down. Generally speaking, the bad times are okay. The good times are really, really good. The reason I'm willing to overlook the cyclicality of this business is because we're buying this thing at a very, very low PE ratio, 7 times earnings. And that sort of is the payoff for doing a more cyclical business. If this company was priced for perfection or priced at 20 or 30 times earnings, I would never look at it. But we're basically getting paid. We're buying this company now as if the earnings were much lower than they are. Consider that this company's earnings cut in half from today's point of view. We'd still be buying this company at less than 15 times earnings with a 3% yield. And that's really the way I'm looking at it. And when the company does go through the good times, the stock will perform well, I believe, and we'll make a lot of money on it. These slides look at net earnings as a percentage of revenue. That's really looking at how much of the revenue is converted to bottom line profit. And obviously that's an important number. You can see that the purple line is the top 25% of companies. This company in the good times is in the top 25% of companies. The bottom line, the orange line, is the bottom 25% of companies. It's really almost always above that. So we're buying this company at a price which is so attractive that I can sit around and wait for the thing to have another good year. Another thing to think about when you're looking at the revenues for this company have really only gone down once or twice in the last 20 years. I believe that that's because this company continues to grow, the industry continues to grow, they buy their competitors, and in the long run, I believe this company is going to continue to do more and more profits, and we're going to do fine. And again, the whole focus of this video, frankly, is that this company is a solid company in an evergreen business. People are always going to eat eggs, and we're buying the stock at a multiple of 7 times earnings. One of the things I talk about when I look at the operations for all of my companies is how well they handle what I consider to be the 4 taxes. So the 4 taxes are things which businesses typically face in some degree to some extent. And I want to get a sense for what these companies' weaknesses are, which of these taxes they're really having to pay. So the 4 taxes are selling and general administrative. Some companies have a lot of that, some companies have very little. Plants and equipment, inventory, and research and development. I want to figure out where the company is spending money related to those things to get a sense for how efficiently this company is using money. Because when you look at plants and equipment, for example, that's a significant expenditure. If a company has a ton of plants and equipment, I want to get a sense that it's not continuing to grow, that the plants and equipment costs aren't growing related to profits. Same thing with R&D. The problem with R&D is you can spend a fortune on R&D and get no product out of it, or you can spend a little bit of R&D and get, the next home run. So I like companies that require as little of all 4 of these taxes as possible. But every company has some component, and almost every company has some component that's really high, oftentimes making up for the areas where they're low in other components. So let me start with this company's selling and general administrative costs are pretty average. They're not, with the exception of 2016, they kind of float around in a acceptable range. There's nothing exciting about it, but we're not going to get hurt. Plants and equipment for this company, they're a little bit high. They're in the bottom 25%, but that's to be expected. This is a very large livestock, agricultural, as well as manufacturing facility. The good news is that if a huge percent of that cost is land, which is we believe pretty transferable. You know that you get your money back from that. And it's something that all of your competitors have to have in an equal degree. So you're not likely to be having costs that your competitors don't have. It's just sort of a cost of doing business. So nothing here with selling a general administrative for plants and equipment is cause for concern, although again, nothing here is really exciting. The next 2 components are inventory and R&D. The good news is this company has absolutely 0 cost for R&D, so that's great. That's one of the 4 taxes that we pay 0. Actually, there's 5 taxes. We'll talk about the 5th in a minute. The next one is inventory. And when I'm looking at inventory, I'm looking at inventory in the context of revenues. So what percentage of revenues are tied up in inventory? And this company's been basically flatline in that number, really between 10 and 15% virtually every year for the last 20 years. It's not a cost that's going to bankrupt us. Obviously, one of the problems with the inventory in this business is the inventory is eggs, and they don't last forever. But this company has a good handle on how many eggs people are going to demand, and there's not likely to be a scenario where people stop wanting eggs and then get stuck holding a bunch of inventory. So I look at inventory as not being a significant concern, and obviously R&D is no concern at all. The final tax is interest payments. Interest payments is the only one of the taxes that's voluntary. A poorly run business will have a bunch of debt. As a result of having a bunch of debt, they pay a bunch of interest. We look at interest expense as a percentage of operating income so that we can look at it in context. If a company's growing their operating income significantly and the debt is growing less slowly, that's really not a problem. If the debt is growing faster than operating income, then that's a problem. So that's what this chart is looking at. And you can see that effectively this company's paying 0 in interest payments. And that is a tremendous advantage. When you're in a business with tight margins, your opponents, your competitors who have to make interest payments have their profits shrunk significantly because most of the revenue is sucked up by the operating cost. Some is sucked up by the additional, all of it is sucked up, most of it is sucked up by the cost of goods sold. What's left is going to be eaten up by inventories and R&D and plants and equipment. And then if on top of that you have high interest costs, you're not going to make it through the bad times. And the good news is this company has no debt, which means that it has a buffer versus their competitors. It's more likely to make it through the bad times. And in fact, it's likely to pick up its competitors and, gobble them up and grow during the bad times, which is one of the major reasons why I'm buying this company. So interest payments to this company are the plus, which makes up for some of the evils of this company having a low operating of having lower gross margins. So in summary, I look for companies, generally speaking, with companies that have gross margins of 40% or better. Cal-Maine does not meet that requirement. The company is also clearly a commodity business, which means, there's periods of much lower income, periods of much higher income, and you sort of have to ride that wave and just accept that that's the way it's going to go. Cal-Maine, generally speaking, has acceptable but nothing special in terms of the 4 taxes. The good news is they have absolutely zero debt costs. That gives them a competitive advantage. They're the low-cost provider. They're the largest producer in their industry, which gives them economies of scale advantage, which translates into them which between that and the no debt means they're a low-cost provider. The fact of the matter is, the thing that I'm excited about this company don't show up in the operations section but I have to show you the video anyways. I have to tell you what's going on with the company, but that's not really the reason to buy this stock. As you'll see in the next 3 videos, the reason to buy the stock is this company has excellent management who does have an outlook to take care of the ownership. The company is strong with their dividends, and they have a fantastic balance sheet with lots and lots of money in the bank and absolutely no debt. And you're going to see that in the next 3 videos. So you just sort of have to accept that this company's operations are average. You have to understand that I've thought that through and I understand that, and I'm still saying this is a great company to buy. And you'll see more about why in the next few videos. Thank you very much for your time.